Thank you for joining us for 10 Minutes with the Artist, an episodic series that explores the professional practice and personal vision that guides artists. On today's episode, we're very proud to have Taressa Bartholomew. Taressa exhibited recent works from her series Intimate Moments at the Memorial Union Gallery during the 2015 Baccalaureate Exhibition. Intimate Moments is a richly layered meditation on the moments in between. This body of work features the Virgin Mary in sometimes private and sometimes painful, but always humanizing moments. I'm Anthony Ferris, and this is 10 Minutes with the Artist. So, welcome, Taressa. One of the things that the viewers have told me is that they're very impressed by sort of the amount of detail in your artwork. There's almost like sort of a photorealistic quality to your work. Mm-hmm. So I was curious if you could talk a little bit about why you chose your medium and not necessarily photography.
I actually did consider photography for a time. I was told that I had a decent amount of talent, whereas I considered it just to be more of a hobby. However, I liked becoming more intimate with my work, and I felt that photography just didn't allow that time, if you will, that I got to spend with drawing, the dry media. And so that's where I decided to go, is just to spend more time with it, in a sense.
Okay. I noticed that a lot of the works that are in the exhibition are created indoors. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of the composition that you chose and why you chose indoors.
I guess part of the reason that I wanted it to be indoors is that's where usually a lot of private moments happen. You know, it's behind closed doors, or what's going on. And like I've stated in my artist statement, the whole purpose of my project was for people to get to know the Virgin Mary, and for them to understand her as a person. And in order for us to understand somebody, we usually have to learn little moments and things about them that they possibly wouldn't share with the entire world. And so that was part of the reasoning for picking and staying indoors, that sort of thing. And then the composition was really decided as to how the moments, they developed themselves in a way, if that makes any sense.
What sort of things did you add in your compositions that sort of talked to that idea of privacy?
A lot of it was lighting, very much, how the lighting was going to be within the composition and the focus, and making sure that there was a lot of kind of darkness around them. Not darkness in so much of that it's evil darkness, if that makes sense, but more darkness in that they feel alone and they are alone. And I wanted very much to bring that out in my composition. And so light helped embellish that.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of the viewers will sort of recognize is this sort of like a Caravaggio-like quality to the work.
Love Caravaggio.
With like very stark lights and darks. Mm-hmm. Okay. So was the light not only sort of atmospheric, but sort of, did you use it as a metaphor?
A little bit, actually. I did. One of the pieces is after the crucifixion, and it's in a moment when John takes Mary home, and she just sort of collapses and is crying her eyes out, because obviously her son has just died. And very much I wanted, the way I put John and Mary was that Mary's much more in the shadows, because this is kind of a dark time for her, whereas more of the light is falling on John. And that's to give him more of the sense of that he needs to be the strength and the leader in this moment.
That's really interesting, because the whole series is about Virgin Mary, but mm-hmm. you're focusing on some of the, not necessarily the key players, mm-hmm. To sort of inform a little bit more information on the Virgin Mary. So I was kind of curious what if it was important to you for these pieces to be historically accurate, you had to make very specific choices about the people, the places, the things that you put in the work. So how historically accurate is it, or is that really even important to you?
It was important to have some historical accuracy to it, so that way people would recognize what kind of the time period was and who these people are. There were some differences and some artistic licenses that I took with some things. For instance, again with John, he has very short, it's more of a contemporary hairstyle. Part of this was because of the reference that I was using. That's the way it was, and so I wanted to stick with that to make sure it all flowed very nicely. And then another part of this as well was that John was always traditionally depicted as a younger man. Sometimes he would be clean shaven or have no beard, and so I wanted to emphasize that on his youth and having a lack of hair, because the elders usually have much longer hair, long beards, and so the short hair was to really emphasize his youth. And there are different things like that within the whole series that emphasize each little thing that are specific choices I made.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the patterning maybe that you chose for some of the clothing? Is that those sorts of textiles, were those, like, how did you make those sorts of choices?
Part of it was aesthetics. I'm very much of a visual person, and so I really wanted it to look good. It sounds a little bad, but some of it was the way the lighting went. I did pick some of the textiles so far as like the setting went. Some of them, one of the pieces I did, the Virgin Sleeping, she has one of the blanket that goes over is kind of a red, it's made out of wool, the actual one that we used. And this one has some patterning, but not a whole lot to it. And so it has, like, when we are sleeping, there's things going on in our mind. Studies have shown that we actually are thinking about things while we sleep. And so that textile, I specifically chose to embellish that fact that there's still something going on, still kind of some movement, but it's still quiet. And again, to go back to the Mary and John one, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more patterns. And this was to emphasize that there's so much going on within this piece.
The medium is very interesting in that it's more of a process where you're adding on black paper. Mm-hmm. Okay, can you talk a little bit about that with that whole aspect of the lights and the darks that we were talking about? You're having to think about this in a completely different way than sort of adding shadows like I think we're probably used to when we see drawings. Mm-hmm. You're sort of just like leaving those areas empty. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So part of my reasoning to go with, I used color pencils and I built layers upon black paper, as you said. And part of my reasoning for this was it was a kind of a spiritual sense in a way. A lot of times, we are taught as Christians, to be a light to the world and, to bring light to the darkness. And this was something I really played on with my artwork and adding those layers and building up that light to bring light to the darkness.
Well, one of the things that we like to do when we're almost sort of finishing up is we like to ask a couple of quick questions about you sort of as an artist. Okay? So what time of day do you feel most creative?
In the evening. Very much at 11 p.m.
Do you listen to music or the radio when you work?
I very much listen to music. I absolutely love movie soundtracks.
Okay.
So much epicness within them.
What are you reading right now? Or what's the last book that you read?
I am currently in the middle of reading the the Sherlock Holmes books.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually have not read all of them. I've only read little snippets here and there, and so I have a friend who's letting me borrow her whole series, and so I'm determined to work my way through the whole thing.
So what's the most challenging thing about working in your medium?
It's very slow And I'm a very slow worker, so it's doubly slow.
Okay.
I'm not a fast artist whatsoever, so it takes a lot of time.
And how do you know when you're finished with a piece of work?
It's a difficult question to answer because I'm a lot like, if anyone who knows J.R.R. Tolkien and how he was constantly going back to his writing and changing things and never feeling quite satisfied, and that's very much me. I never feel quite satisfied. So sometimes I have to tell myself that it's finished, and I have to step back and make that decision and go, this is it.
If you could have dinner with any artist, who would it be?
Just one?
Yes. Besides me.
Oh, well, dang. Gosh, honestly, I would probably pick Wesley Dennis. He was an illustrator back in the 40s. He did a lot of books by Marguerite Henry, did a lot of illustrations for horse books quite a bit, and he had a very realistic but very expressive style. And there's not a lot of information on him, and I'd love to know more about him and his work.
And last question, what's next?
What's next as far as my artwork or my life, or what's next?
Pretty open-ended.
Well, right now, next is getting married and graduating and really beginning my art career and going out in the real world. I'm so excited for that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our guests today, and I'd also like to thank you for your time and your interest in the professional practice and creative explorations happening here at North Dakota State University. Thank you, and for everyone here at the Memorial Union Gallery, keep creative.